So I'm going to hit the record button and get started.
No problem.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another meeting of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce's Legislative Affairs Committee. I'm Brian Levine, and I'm Vice President of Government Affairs for the Chamber. And as we do for most of our committee meetings, we are recording this one. And for those who don't know, I think we have a lot of familiar faces here, but this Legislative Affairs Committee meets several times a year, usually on the second Thursday of the month during the interim of the General Assembly, and then weekly during the legislative session of the General Assembly. So we do have additional meetings coming up for the remainder of the year, October 10th, November 14th, and December 12th. Stay tuned for topic and speakers for those upcoming meetings. For questions today, as usual, you know the Zoom routine. Please start by using the chat box or raise your virtual hand when we get to the Q&A and dialogue portion. I'll leave it up to Council President Friedson on if he wants a dialogue in between or just at the end. And if you can, please put the entity of who you work for in the box. One easy way to do it if you're on a computer is to go to the upper right-hand corner and click those dots, and then there's a rename function there. That would be helpful. And with all that out of the way, Council President Friedson, let me first hand it over to our chair and co-chair of our Legislative Affairs Committee, and that is Leslie Ford Weber and Bill Wishman.
Thanks, Brian. I'm actually going to turn it over to Bill first because I know he has advised us that he has to leave early, so give him a chance to say hello, and then I'll pick up again.
Good morning, Councilmember Friedman. We're so happy to have you. My name is Bill Wishman. I serve as the General Counsel of Kaiser Permanente, and I co-chair this committee with Leslie. And again, thanks for your time. We know it's the beginning of a new session, and we're really pleased to hear what you have to say about the next couple of months. So thank you.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. For those of you who haven't had the opportunity, and I think most of us have known Andrew. Andrew is a member of the County Council. He is my district council member representing the lower portion of the county, lower and western portions of the county. And since December, Andrew has been serving a dual role, both as chair of the, let me get them right, PHP committee, and also, though, in this capacity, as his peers elected him to be their council president. So your term, Andrew, I think, is council president, and maybe it's Cindy who's really got the calendar with the Xboxes marked going off. Runs till December, I think.
Yep.
Great. And I think we're all interested to hear what might be ahead. Let me start with something, look back a little bit. You know, it's the start of a term. You've just come off recess. So tell us, you know, if you had to write an essay for your voters about what you did for your August recess, what would be the highlight?
Well, I went to the convention, which was fun in Chicago. So I'd say that was probably the highlight, and got to go with my wife. We stayed with friends, actually, and she worked from Chicago and tagged along to a couple events. But yeah, it was fun. A lot of excitement.
All right, great. Well, thanks for representing all of us there, and thank you for being back and heading into work. So, as Bill mentioned, we're all very interested in knowing with 2.5 months to go in your term as council president, what are some of the priorities that you all are working on?
Yeah,
actually,
sure.
Let me stop. Andrew, I jumped right into questions. If there's some prefacing remarks that you want to make, please ignore my questions and go right into that too.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just, my suggestion, I will just quickly go over some of the things that we have been working on to kind of look back, because I think that sets the stage for looking forward. And then really mention kind of the highlights of what we're up to over the next couple of months, because we have a busy fall, really busy fall, particularly for me as both council president and planning, housing, parks chair, because a lot of it is in my arena, in my committee jurisdiction. And then open up to questions, really spend most of the time with questions. So first of all, thanks for having me. Always great to be at the chamber. I consider to be a close partner and dear friend, and appreciate everything that you do, everything that your members do, everything that your organizations do to provide us with the revenue that we need to pay for all the services and to protect and look after our most vulnerable residents, to prioritize the many values that we share. So thank you for that. I don't think our business community gets thank yous enough from county government. So I want to start with that. As you know, really, the big thing we do every year, we have two jobs. We do land use at the county council, and we pass a budget, a $7.1 billion budget. And as council president, that's really my primary responsibility, is shepherding through that process. Notwithstanding challenges that you always have during a budget year, we really, I think, had a successful collaborative budget process last year. $7.1 billion budget in Montgomery County. I think most people lose sight of how big the county government is and how significant our budget is, bigger than 6 or 7 states. We had a significant focus on public safety, and particularly on leveraging technology within public safety. I was really happy to see and proud of and appreciate the Chamber's support for the expansion of the Drone as First Responder program. We're the largest jurisdiction in the country doing anything of this kind, to use technology in this way, which was really a positive. And I pushed really hard to make sure that Bethesda was one of the sites where it expanded, where so many of our businesses are located, particularly related to helping with theft, which is one of the most impactful and effective aspects of the Drone as First Responder program to stop with and address and prevent theft, which is really exciting. And then the Up County, which has significant needs and is too often left behind in county government. And so I pushed hard for that in Gaithersburg and Germantown as well. We in total funded $331 million for public safety, and that's a major priority for the Chamber. And so I really appreciate that. We did quite a bit in economic development. I will say I'm very proud of working together with you to pass the jobs initiative. Thank you to the Chamber for your staunch support of my initiative and our initiative. Together, the jobs initiative is the most significant individual economic development package in the county's history. From what anybody can tell, I haven't been around for all of the county's history, but I'll take everybody's word for it. And it's a $20 million fund. It's really a loud signal to the business community, not just here, but everywhere, that if you invest in Montgomery County, we want to invest in you. And I don't think that has been the message that we have sent and that we have shared, to be intentional, to be competitive, to recognize that people have choices, businesses have decisions to make, and we have to make their decisions more compelling. And that $20 million fund is a fund for job creation, $10,000 a job for 5 jobs, paying over $100,000 in strategic industries, and a job creation fund with a 20% bonus if you're in a community equity index, to be intentional about where the jobs are created if we can. It's an innovation fund to double down on our leadership globally in biohealth and technology and innovation, and turning research into jobs and into investments and into opportunities for people to grow our economy. And then a founders equity fund. The beauty of this is none of the things that we're doing are new. They have been tried and true in jurisdictions all across the country. I said, what are other people doing and that are working, and let's do it here. And I think sometimes we try to do things differently than everybody else. Sometimes we can just take what other people are doing and do more of it, but we're doing more of it than any other jurisdiction. And we're the only jurisdiction that I've seen to do all of it together. So really excited about that. That is set to launch imminently. I've been pushing. I just had a conversation yesterday with the Economic Development Corporation. They're waiting on the executive branch for the sign off, which should be happening anytime. And then we'll be ready to rock and roll with that. So thank you for your support of that. Obviously, transportation is a huge issue and something that we all care very deeply about. Very pleased with some of the transportation initiatives in the budget, including Great Seneca. And to build on that, we actually launched the pink and lime lines for the Great Seneca Transitway just this week on Monday. And really exciting about what that will mean to connect universities at Shady Grove, one of our key educational institutions, with some important economic areas, like Rio and downtown Crown, but also connect people to jobs in the biohealth and biotech area there as well. We passed a bill to expand and codify the MOVE program, which provides incentives for businesses to lease space in Montgomery County and provide some additional funding for that and eligibility for more funding for that. And we really doubled down on affordable housing. That's been my key area. It's the main reason why I ran for the county council, grow the economy and create housing opportunities where people can actually live here. We funded the housing programs in the budget at $168 million, actually just over $168 million, significant funding. It builds on the record funding that we have provided for affordable housing over the last several years. We were not focusing on this nearly enough. We finally are now, but we have a lot of catching up to do. And as part of that, I'm very proud of the fact that we finally launched something that I've been working on for several years with partners and county government and the Housing Opportunities Commission, which is the Nonprofit Preservation Fund. It's a $50 million preservation fund. It's the most significant effort in the region, probably in the country, to preserve up to a half of our naturally occurring affordable housing in the county. And it builds on, it was always supposed to be the second piece of the $100 million housing production fund that I helped to spearhead through the council. That is a construction loan fund that is a public-private partnership with private developers and the Housing Opportunities Commission to build mixed income housing throughout the county, particularly in transit accessible places. That's been featured in the New York Times and Vox Media. It's been replicated in jurisdictions all over the country. It was noted and acknowledged by the White House as ways that states and local governments can step up to address the housing crisis. And actually, the governor is now looking at ways to help other jurisdictions in Maryland do what we're doing here. So, we have a lot of work to do in Montgomery County, but we're doing a lot of exciting things. Very proud of that and look forward to continuing that. Looking ahead to the fall, what do we got going on? Quite a bit, I will say. Growth and infrastructure policy is probably the biggest undertaking, most formal undertaking, and has the most impact on the business community from my perspective. It's probably the least known, most important thing that the county does. And it really dictates how, where, and under what circumstances and what costs, frankly, that we build in Montgomery County. And I don't need to tell Leslie or others on this call who are intimately aware of what this means for you, but it's very important. We have a planning board recommendation that's before us that includes the policy changes and also the impact tax recommendations. There are a number of exemptions, some of which are somewhat controversial. And so we're going to have to take those up and pick and decide, what we do and how we do it. And we have to be done by November. So we're going to go no slower than needed to be substantive and meet legal requirements, and no faster than to be thoughtful as we possibly can. But that's a big undertaking. Second work session is going to be on the 23rd. We've already had the first we had the briefing at the full council. The first work session will be on the 16th at the PHP committee. Second work session is scheduled for the 23rd. And essentially the tax piece of it will be on the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, which I serve on. And the land use and policy issues will be in the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, which I chair. So stay tuned for that. Attainable housing strategies, which from what I understand has generated some interest within the community. We're taking that up now. We had our first listening session last night in Silver Spring, which actually went exceptionally well. I will say it was a broad range of support and opposition questions, supportive comments, and concerning comments. Really helpful for us. We're having 5 of those sessions, plus a virtual session. I was joined last night by a few colleagues. I expect to be joined by colleagues at other ones as well. But Jason Sartori, the director of the planning department, and I are co-hosting those, and tonight we'll be in Wheaton. Next week, we'll have 3 more of the sessions in White Oak, in Germantown, and in Bethesda, and then the virtual as well. We'll take the information and the feedback that we get, and we'll use that to decide how to move forward. I'll reiterate that we don't have any legislative proposals before us. We have recommendations from the Planning Department and Planning Board. We had 3 briefings at the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee over the summer on what those recommendations are. And then ultimately, after the listening sessions, colleagues and I will have to decide what legislative proposal we plan to put forward and how we're going to take this up. I will say the recommendations are huge in terms of the breadth of them: small scale, medium scale, and large scale. There's a lot in there. And so there are, questions about how we move forward and how we address that. I realistically don't think we will do nothing. I don't think that's an option realistically. But there's a good chance we do something that is not all of the recommendations, or not totally exactly in line with what the Planning Board has recommended to us. We have to figure that out. We have to think through it. We have to move forward, but we do have real housing challenges, and we do have to address them in a thoughtful way. And I'm trying as best as I can to facilitate a process that will help us do that. With that, love to open it up to questions and focus most of the time on that. But I would say those are the 2 biggest ones. The only other thing that I would mention is BEPS, which has significant impact on many of you. And the Chamber has been very active in that. Leslie and others on healthcare and other impacts in particular. I know Kaiser as well, I'm sure, has impacts. We are going to extend that again. Not surprisingly, the council and the committee are not ready to take up those issues and are still trying to do our work. I have been going around and meeting with businesses and also condos and residents to understand the challenges, and there's work to do. So stay tuned on that, but those are kind of the 3 major pillars of things that we're working on, with all the other stuff as well. So appreciate it. And the only other thing that I would say is we have a new fire chief, we have a new police chief, significant leadership changes at the county, and we'll have some new police leadership changes, including one that'll be coming very soon to the council in terms of the assistant chief and other ranks. So stay tuned for that, because that will have an impact on many of the businesses and others, just in terms of who you deal with and interact with on a regular basis.
Wow. All right. I'm glad that you took some time to go back and forth, because you touched on a number of things that we had questions about before. I guess let me ask a question about timing. I hadn't appreciated the deadline on the growth and infrastructure policy coming up in November, and given how large, if you will, the conversation and intense interest there is on attainable housing, what's your sense of the timeline for how long it's going to take to this conversation about attainable housing? Is that going to be one that extends past your council presidency, just given the amount of time that's going to have to go into the growth and infrastructure policy?
Well, if you just figure out the timing, the listening sessions, are happening now. There needs to be some time to complete that. Nothing is going to happen, if I have anything to do with it, before the listening sessions, because that's the whole point of doing the listening sessions. And I think colleagues are committed to that as well, which I appreciate, and have bought into this, plan of an approach that I have put forward. So assuming that happens and it takes some time to put together a proposal, there is no proposal that we have currently. We're, assessing and digging into these issues, and just the time that it then takes for a public hearing, et cetera. It would be very unlikely that any final action would happen before the end of my presidency. Now, I think there's a good chance introduction of something happens during the fall. But I think it's realistically unlikely that we're able to complete something because it is a complicated dynamic that's going to require significant conversation. So I don't have an exact timeline to offer you because none has been established. At this point, we have to go through the regular legislative process. But if you were just gaming this out in your mind, realistically, the likelihood is, even if something is introduced, which I would say is probable during the fall over the next couple months, the likelihood that it would be completed after a public hearing, given the statutory requirements and just the practical realities, would be unlikely.
I think that's helpful. Some of us are, people recognize folks who are on this call are engaged in civic activities in the area. Our friends and neighbors ask us about it. And this is one of the things I'm even hearing about. So it's good to be able to give, those folks a sense of the
You're
timeline.
hearing about that in East Bethesda? I'm shocked.
Gosh, yeah. And encourage them to participate in those conversations. So
Sorry, Bill has already given me his viewpoints on it as well. And I hope we'll continue.
right. Well, because Bill used to represent my neighborhood as well. So he knows the folks. Ashley, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Leslie. Good morning, Mr. Council President. It's always good to see you, and thank you for being here this morning. As I'm sure you know, the county executive has been out and about a lot talking about special taxing districts and wanting to copy what he says Northern Virginia does. And I'm just curious, understanding that there's no bill to look at this point, I'm curious as to your thoughts and reactions to that.
Yeah, well, my thoughts and reactions to it are the same as they've been all along. The county executive has been talking about this for years, like many things that he talks about. The challenge with the county executive is I actually agree with him on some things, but he leaves the other parts out. And, I'm willing to go along if we're willing to go along all the way. If he wants to do everything the way that Northern Virginia does it, that's something for us to consider. Some of it would require state law changes, but that would include no local income tax. It would include no MPDU laws. It would include a proffer system where you extract out of each project public benefits as opposed to having a standardized public benefit system. It's a completely different system. Those costs are different per project. And so you can't have it both ways. You can't take the parts of the other system you like and not the other parts of the system. It's like, I like the efficiency of a dictatorship, but the participation of a democracy, you got to kind of pick, right? There's a trade-off on a lot of these on a lot of these things. Having said that, I'll just be very clear. I participated in a working group and played a very integral role in a working group where we talked about eliminating impact taxes and leveraging state funding in order to bond money, which would be an independent revenue authority, partially through increased taxes, a marginal increase in taxes, in order to build out our entire bus rapid transit network. We had leading business folks on that, Doug Furstenberg as essentially leading that group, Chris Conklin playing a significant role, and I was intimately involved in it. We had an agreement. We were ready to move forward. I was prepared to sell that idea to the business community with Doug and others to explain that it's a small price to pay for a huge benefit that would serve businesses and the county well. Transportation is a huge challenge for businesses, and we have not done as well as we should. That was killed when the county executive put forward a 10% property tax increase, and everybody who was part of that carefully crafted deal bailed, because you can't operate in a vacuum and assume that the decisions you make in one area don't impact another. So the county executive could have had exactly what he's asking for. He chose to go in another direction. He lacked focus, and ultimately thought that what he had wanted and what he had agreed to wasn't enough for him. And it is what it is, unfortunately, and we're going to have to move forward and figure it out. But you know, I don't disagree with everything the county executive says. I just disagree with the fact that he leaves out key details that have significant impacts. And I think as businesses, you know better, you know, and you understand the realities of what he is saying and what he is not saying. So you know, I'll continue to advocate for rational, thoughtful ways for us to move forward, but it can't be you know, using businesses as an ATM to solve problems, and it can't be a way to simply put the burden on businesses and leave out everybody else, you know, as part of the solution as well, because it's not just commercial property that benefits from transportation. It's everybody who benefits from transportation, and we need to have everybody be part of the solution.
Well, we appreciate your advocacy, and it'll be an interesting conversation. I want to build on this a little bit. You had mentioned in the context of talking about the jobs program that you had looked towards what others were doing that was successful. So setting aside the sort of tired conversation and comparison that came up last week about what Fairfax is doing, are there areas that you look to or that you found helpful in sort of crafting? You know, here's some places similar to us or not similar that are doing some interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, we did look at Virginia, and we looked at how they funded their projects. I mean, it's not complicated. The places that are doing things, and the places that aren't doing things. And right now, when it comes to transportation in particular, in Maryland, and a lot of this is a Maryland challenge, you know, that Montgomery County is a part of, we're not doing enough to address, you know, large scale transportation projects. That's just the reality of it. You know, we're struggling to get the Purple Line off the ground. That has been a mismanaged project, even though I continue to be a Purple Line supporter and believe that that project needs to be finished, completed, and built out. And I look forward to going to my first College Park football game on the Purple Line. God willing, you know, hopefully under the you know, in the next you know, reasonable period of time. But you know, we need to solve these issues. We need a new American Legion bridge. I mean, there are a number of things that we need to do, and if you look across the river, they are doing it. So the county executive isn't wrong in the sense that he's saying, you know, Virginia is doing things. It's just, you know, he's left out some key details. And if you look around the country, it's, you know, the places that are doing things are seeing success, and you know, success breeds success. You know, I fundamentally believe that the business community would step up and be part of the solution if they saw the benefits of it, if they trusted the people who are making the decisions, that they were looking out for the interests of business as well as residents. You know, I think that has not always been the case, and that is one of the challenges that we face. But you can just, I mean, look at a map and see the number of projects, transportation projects in Virginia, and look at the number of transportation projects in the Maryland suburbs of DC, and it's staggering, the difference. It's a huge difference. There's no doubt. And then the last thing that I will say is, and this is different, in Virginia, and this is true in housing and it's true in transportation, Virginia took a different approach. And this is where I would, you know, advocate the county executive rather than bashing Montgomery County and saying that Northern Virginia is better than we are, which is an odd position to take as the chief executive of a jurisdiction. And I don't share that point of view and never will. But where he could advocate and where I would share in his advocacy is that Richmond has seen the value of Northern Virginia to the benefit of the whole state in a new way over the last 15 or 20 years. That didn't exist 15 or 20 years ago, where the center of the universe in Virginia was Richmond. And they focused really in other parts of Virginia and not in Northern Virginia, and kind of let Northern Virginia do its own thing and left them out on an island unto themselves. Took the revenue with no problem, happily, but didn't really put an emphasis politically. That has changed. And now there is dedicated funding for affordable housing, 9% tax credits, Northern Virginia only. We need to do things like that. We need to, have, transportation prioritization of Northern Virginia projects to address, those issues. We need to do that in Maryland, in the Maryland suburbs. I would love to have a Prince George's, Montgomery County 9% tax credit program, just like there is in Virginia. I've been advocating for that for years. I'd love to see an emphasis by the state in funding specific, projects and specific funding and programs for the Maryland suburbs, understanding that our costs are unique and we are the engine economically for the rest of the state, and you got to prime the pump. Virginia has seen that, and Maryland to the same extent has not. And I'm hoping that changes. And I think that's where we all can work together to advocate in Annapolis to ensure that we're getting what we need in Montgomery County specifically, but also in the Maryland, DC suburbs.
Yeah, let's stay on transportation for a minute, because of course, as you know, the governor right at the start of the fiscal year announced some significant cuts, particularly in transportation, and a deferral of addressing the American Legion Bridge that you just mentioned. So it sounds like, Andrew, do you see yourself spending even more time in Annapolis and helping to build sort of some consensus conversations around how to move forward in a time of what seems to be very constrained revenues relative to things we want to do?
Yes, I spent a lot of time last session in Annapolis, trying my best to represent the county in a constructive and productive way without insulting the integrity and the morality of our partners that we desperately need in the General Assembly. We've done well. We're well positioned in the State House. We have Craig Zucker at Capital Budget, which is a huge benefit to Montgomery County. We have, several committee chairs and people in key positions. Brian Feldman and Mark Corman were instrumental. We had an issue with Montgomery County related to the governor's housing package. And, I was able to broker a deal with them to make sure that, our local authority and our local laws were not usurped in an unintended way. As part of that process, at the 11th hour, literally in the final moments of when the final decisions in the back rooms were being made. I mean, it makes a difference to have leadership in Annapolis. I'm proud of the fact that I have really good relationships with them, with Janelle Wilkin, Will Smith, you name it. It matters, and it's important. Relationships matter. So yes, we need to advocate. Yes, I intend to continue to play a role there. Obviously, my background was in Annapolis, and I maintain a number of relationships there as well. Also, my former role at the Board of Public Works. A lot of things go through the Board of Public Works, and it has an impact on Montgomery County. There have been a number of situations where even releasing funds or making exceptions so that the county could move forward with parks dispositions. For instance, I've been able to step in and help with that. So it's true on transportation, but it's true on everything. It turns out in politics, just like in business, relationships matter, and I happen to believe in relationships.
I've been asking all the questions, and I know there's some great people on the call here who may have some other things to say. But let me look to see. Brian.
I'm not one of those great people, but I'm more of a statement rather than a question. I just wanted to give some praise to Council President Friedson. For the nerds like Ashley and me, we pay attention to what the Council President says all the way back in December about the accomplishments that he wanted to have during his Council presidency, things like attainable housing, housing and aging in place. I mean, those have been accomplished. Some of them, I know the aging in place has been accomplished, but another thing you said was you want to do something for economic development related, business climate related. And boy, did you. I knew you talked about it already, the $20 million for the 3 economic development funds. One of my questions is going to be, where does that stand? If you need a push with the executive branch, please let us know about getting those online. But just a tremendous accomplishment. I wish I'd thought of it. Really, I can't understate that in our wildest expectations, could we have expected someone to propose that much money for 3 funds? I wouldn't change any of the funds and what they do. That's what I would have thought of if you give me some time to do so. So just in summary, we were very pleased to support Council President's $20 million special appropriation for these funds. We really appreciate the effort, and we really appreciate the thought behind it, which is, as you said up top, showing that Montgomery County is serious about economic development and developing businesses. So it's more of a thank you. Thank you, Council President Friedson.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not a great person either, but I work real hard. So appreciate that, and appreciate you, and appreciate the advocacy of the chamber. Everybody is fully on board, and we all share in the credit for that program, which I'm happy to share it. But it wasn't easy, and there were some, there was some pushback that we received of, why economic development? Why not something else? And, I am proud of the fact that we did it. I think that signal was critical for us to send that message of, if you want to invest in Montgomery County, we want to invest in you. We're here to partner with the business community. We understand that you have choices, and we want to help make your choices more compelling. I think those messages are more important now than ever. I will be clear. I think Montgomery County has the strongest economic bones of any place on earth. I would put our natural strengths and assets against any other jurisdiction anywhere. And I will always do that. But we have not connected the dots always, and are not as good as the sum of our parts always as we could be and as we should be. We're not as strong as the people we have here. We're not as powerful as the businesses and the innovation that is happening here. And that's a leadership question. And that's where we need county government to step up. And I think this is one example of how we can do that. And I really appreciate that. We're essentially waiting for the sign off of the executive branch. So, we'll let you know if we need you to give a little bit of a nudge. I'm nudging, so I'll start with that. But I just had a conversation, as I mentioned, with the Economic Development Corporation. That's where things stand as well. I will note that project and program does not happen without Cindy Gibson, who's on the call as well, my chief of staff, just like everything else that I do and that we're doing at the council. So wanted to thank her as well. And I also saw that Ashima from Chris Van Hollen's office is here as well, a dear friend and a great advocate for us, and really appreciate that. As I mentioned, our relationships, we talked a lot about Annapolis, but we have leaned into our federal partners as much over the last several years, pandemic and moving forward, as we ever have, and we need it more than ever. And so really appreciate Senator Van Hollen and her partnership and leadership as well.
Will, I wanted to call on you for a second from PEPCO. There was an interesting side conversation a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago, with someone saying that I guess it was planning, and folks talking about how they're just, they're spending a lot of time on master plans, but not seeing a lot of projects coming through. And then there was this whole controversy this summer over the PJM auction issues. I'm just wondering, as we're looking at, the council president mentioned, extending the time consideration for the building energy performance standards, and there's a hurricane in Louisiana. Just what are we not perhaps paying attention to in our infrastructure issues that you all are focusing in on?
Yeah, I had a conversation at Mako with the council president just related to the emergence of, and we're talking about a lot in Virginia here, but the emergence of data centers and the strain that has put on the grid, and just the overall thoughts of how the county, Montgomery County, is looking at data centers as whether it's a commercial opportunity to grow your tax base or others. And so council member, I'll turn it over to you if there's, from an energy standpoint, we're seeing the need for more electricity because of the growth in regenerative AI and data centers. But thoughts on in Montgomery County in terms of how you all are approaching the conversation related to data centers because of, Loudoun County and others, how aggressive they've been within that particular sector.
Yeah, data center is a big question. I will say I've spoken quite a bit with Brian Feldman about it, who has become the leader in the state, on those issues and trying to figure out how to make Maryland more competitive in the data center arena. We are starting to see it a little bit in Frederick. Candidly, data centers are a challenge given our fuel energy tax on buildings. It's one of the things that I've talked to Senator Feldman about. We have some structural issues in Maryland, even just the cost of energy for those, having nothing to do with the government. It's more expensive here than in other places, which makes those projects a little bit less viable. Property is also expensive, but that's actually the less of the concern and issue. So we are having some conversations. There are some large scale projects that we're looking at doing, but in order to make them happen, there have to be some changes, frankly, to make them more compelling and more competitive. It's not to say that they aren't possible. They're just very challenging to make the dollars and cents work. Usually it's a people-powered business, but in the case of data centers, there's almost no people and it's almost all energy consumption. And so, it's basically like a self-storage, type of situation, but with a ton more energy. So at any rate, we're gonna have to figure that out if we want to be in the data center game. But that's one of the challenges that we face. There's like a Maryland challenge in general that's a statewide issue that they are working on very aggressively, and I've talked to Senator Feldman a lot about that, and I've tried to be helpful in those conversations and just offer some feedback of my limited knowledge. And then there's a Montgomery County piece that's largely not only availability of land, but also and cost, but really the fuel energy tax, which is a major issue.
Yeah, I appreciate, and certainly that in Montgomery County, given our aspirations around bioscience, which has and advanced computing, the availability of electricity is going to be important to us. So I appreciate that you guys are already looking ahead and talking about that and trying to make sure we have it in place. I see we do try and be very efficient with everyone's time, and I see folks signing off. So I don't see any questions on board. I will say, Council President, you mentioned that someday you hope to ride the Purple Line to College Park for a game, but you can't this weekend, but there is a big one. What's the first time the Terps have hosted Virginia in 10 years or so in College Park. So any predictions for the game?
I'm hoping for a bounce back because I was devastated last weekend. A tough loss, no business losing that game. So I'm all in, go Terps. Hopefully they can bounce back. They certainly need it. Got to shore up a young secondary there and make sure we get the run game in order. So I'm hoping for a bounce back game and go Terps all the way.
All right. Well, certainly loyal son of Maryland, loyal son of Montgomery County, and we appreciate both and your leadership. Our next meeting, Brian, is in October.
Yeah, it's October 10th, and we're working on that one. So everyone on this call will receive notice soon about what we will be talking about.
Thanks so much
again for your time this morning, and thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the weekend. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brian.